What if I told you that there are these parks that are hidden away in the Canadian Rockies on the border of British Columbia and Alberta? And what if I also told you that they are beautiful? Really beautiful. Like unimaginably beautiful. I'm gonna walk you guys through how to make your 5-day trip in Banff and Jasper epic, with some tips like how to see Peyto Lake even when the lookout is closed. We did this trip in September, so for those of you planning on traveling in the fall, this itinerary is extra relevant. First tip, go in September. Less people and honestly, prettier views. Our first day began early, which was a common theme of the trip. Hooray for 5 a.m. wake up times, right? We started in Calgary and our plan was to drive along the Icefields Parkway checking out the scenery on the way to Jasper, where we would end the day. Our first stop was Banff. Turns out we had woken up so early that we were ahead of the sun, so we spontaneously decided to stop over at Tujak Lake and catch the sunrise. Honestly, this ended up being one of the best decisions we made on the trip. Now that we had enjoyed the sunrise at Tujak Lake, we pushed onto what many would consider the most scenic 230 kilometers of road on the planet, the Icefields Parkway. This highway runs through the finest landscapes of the Canadian Rockies, giving access to beautiful turquoise lakes, raging waterfalls, and views of the tallest peaks in the mountain range. Our first stop on this highway was Peyto Lake. Unfortunately, to our surprise, they closed the lookout for improvements until the end of the year. But we weren't going to leave without seeing what I've heard to be one of the most beautiful lakes on the planet. We hunted for another access point. With a couple of U-turns, we found a hidden hike that gets you to the shores of Peyto Lake. A good reason to be watching this video before your trip. Keep driving north after the official lookout. The next little parking lot on the left is where you'll find the trailhead of the hike. It took us about an hour and a half round trip to hang out at the lake and get through the hike. Now, the views are not as good, but not many people know about this trail, so we were the only ones on the beach of Peyto Lake. And let's be honest, having no one else around is still a big win. We hit up a few more spots before we ended the long day in Jasper. If you're not careful, you might end up spending your whole trip here. It took us roughly 11 hours to get to Jasper, and we were very much exhausted at the end of it. So I definitely recommend spending the night in Jasper instead of heading back the same day. We woke up bright and early in Jasper and were greeted by a family of elks. The mother and her children were hanging out right at our hotel. Oh yeah, don't worry, the dad was right behind them. And then on a drive into Moraine Valley, we saw a couple more elks. We figured the abundance of wildlife roaming around was because of the lack of crowds, which we appreciated. Our plan for today was to check out Moraine Valley, which boasts almost all the must-see attractions in Jasper. Our first stop in Moraine Valley was the Moraine Lake parking lot, where we prepared for what was going to be one of the best hikes I had done in a while, the Bald Hills Trail. This hike is an elevation gain of about 2,500 feet, so it's not for everyone, but if you're reasonably fit, you'll have no trouble. We were the very first ones on this trail. As we started to realize how great it was to not have anyone else around, we saw this sign. We just saw this. We're in fucking bear territory and grizzly bears frequenting this area. So we just had a conversation about how we're gonna get fucked and how we're gonna avoid getting fucked. This freaked us out a bit considering none of us had any idea on how to handle a bear encounter. Murphy's Law and all that, right? But more on that later. As we hiked through the damp forest, the sun occasionally peeked out and made everything around us glimmer. It created some magical scenes. If this wasn't enough, after passing the tree line, we got to see some insane views of Moraine Lake and the surrounding mountain ranges. The views at the summit did not disappoint either, giving us panoramic views of the area. As we headed back down, we met a group of hikers on their way up. They greeted us with the terrifying news that they had spotted 4 grizzly bears on the way up. Okay, so I just heard some news from those hikers that you can see behind us. There's some bears over there. Well, shit.
Rocks? Rocks? What the fuck?
Fortunately, we met up with another hiker on our way back and formed a group of 4. So if it ever came down to it, we'd have enough people to tackle the bears 1v1. Turns out, she had even less experience than us and was equally terrified. Have you ever encountered a grizzly bear? Do you know what's... No? Our only option was to weaponize and strategize all the ways we would come out of this alive. Unfortunately for everyone watching, we did not encounter any bears. Hey, bear, 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 bear. Likely because we made a bunch of noise every few minutes on the way down to alert the bears of our presence. In all seriousness though, you're likely not going to win a bear fight. You're not Leonardo DiCaprio. So if you take anything away from this video, bring bear spray and do not hike alone. Since we still had a good deal of time on our hands, we enjoyed some lunch in the car and walked down to Moraine Lake. We unfortunately didn't get to see the popular view, but we had seen enough of Moraine Lake on the hike already. So instead, we drove down to Medicine Lake and spent a significant amount of time soaking in the views there. I'd say Medicine Lake is one of the most unique lakes I've seen to date. It starts to drain in the fall, revealing the sheltered earth from underneath. It's not pretty like the others, but it's definitely got its own charm. We made our final stop at Moraine Canyon before heading back to Jasper. Moraine Canyon is a must if you're visiting Jasper. It's almost like a guided tour with 6 different bridges to get a peek at the canyon from various angles. It's a bit mesmerizing watching the water pummel through the canyon. Since we had explored the must-see places in Jasper on day 2, we took it a bit easy on day 3. Our plan for today was simple. Explore the area around the town of Jasper and then head back to Banff. The first thing on our list, the Jasper Skytram. We took it up Whistler's Mountain to an insane elevation of 7,000 feet. A small hike after the Skytram took us all the way up to the summit. This hike is definitely doable for most people. We saw folks of all ages going up the trail. We got to the top a bit earlier than others and enjoyed the crazy panoramic views without distraction. With time still left before we had to leave for Banff, we made a quick stop at Patricia and Pyramid Lakes. These lakes are only about a 10-minute drive away from Jasper, so definitely worth checking out if you have some extra time. Oh, did I mention how beautiful this place looks in the fall, by the way? After that quick detour, we headed towards Banff to end the day early in preparation for our crazy day tomorrow. You might be wondering why it's so dark. Well, it's about 6 a.m. and we're hiking to catch the sunrise at Lake Louise. Right when we arrived at the parking lot, it was immediately clear that staying here would mean contending with massive crowds, which is why we're on this hike to Fairview Lookout, hoping to get a better view and avoid the crowds in the process. As we soon found out, Fairview was the name of the hotel in front of the lake, so all that hiking in the dark gave us a better view of the hotel. As you can imagine, we weren't too pleased. Lesson learned, do a bit more research and don't opt for a terrible view just to avoid crowds. After that disappointing view, we decided we had to see the more generic lookout that everyone takes pictures of on Instagram. Despite the crowds, I get the appeal. It's iconic. Once we had soaked in the views of Lake Louise, we ventured onto the Plain of Six Glaciers Trail. This trail is about a 9-mile out and back with roughly 2,000 feet of elevation gain. The elevation gain was quite mild and stretched out, so we saw people with various fitness levels tackling the hike. The hike starts right alongside Lake Louise and goes deep into the valley. I hadn't realized exactly how deep this valley was until I hiked this trail. The lake is tiny in comparison. There are some phenomenal views of the mountains in the backdrop of Lake Louise. Oh, and there's a nice little tea house on the way to the viewpoint, a perfect little stop for some hot drinks. It was then, as if our hike was scripted, that it started to snow. The feeling of having a hot drink in the middle of a forest as the snow falls while having your friends around you is magical. Before we could continue further, the weather went absolutely bonkers. At this point, we contemplated whether it was worth it to continue on to the viewpoint. Many folks turned around and suggested we should as well. Wanting to see the viewpoint was a bit optimistic. We couldn't even see 20 feet ahead of us. Even so, we decided that it was worth a shot. Worst case, it'll be an experience, right? Remember how this hike felt a bit scripted? Well, the weather magically cleared up and we got some epic views of the mountains as the snow fell around us. After spending some time at the viewpoint, we headed back to end our long day. Our plan for tomorrow was to wake up even earlier in the hopes of catching the sunrise at the other popular lake. Yup, it's dark, and we're hiking again. And it's early, really early, like 4 a.m. early. But this time we're at Moraine Lake and we've learned our lesson. So we're hiking to the rock pile, which is the de facto spot to get the perfect view of Moraine Lake. As the sun slowly rose, we start seeing why many people consider this lake the highlight of Banff. I'll let the man who discovered the lake tell you how he felt. After soaking in the view, we did a small but quite strenuous hike up to Larch Valley. It's only about a 4-mile round trip, but it gains roughly 1,000 feet of elevation on the way up. The effort definitely paid off as we were greeted with views of some gorgeous large trees. The scene was just beautiful, blue skies, insane peaks, and these unique golden larch trees. If it wasn't for the crowds, I would have liked this a lot more. Even so, this is a must-see if you're going to visit Banff in the fall. These large trees are something else. After heading back down, we wanted to end the trip off with some canoeing on the lake. To our disappointment, canoeing in Lake Moraine is closed off during the fall since the water level is too low. So, thinking on our feet, we decided to head over to Lake Louise instead, where we were able to get into canoes without much delay. The guys over there told us mid-afternoons are the best time to canoe since the morning crowd is gone. He wasn't wrong, the experience definitely did not disappoint.